In today's lesson, we're going to talk about dividing decimal numbers. We discussed this in class today, but I want to talk you through one problem and make sure that we touch upon all the key points. What I also want to do is to make sure we touch upon the vocabulary. So the problem that you see here, we're going to start out with negative 4.6875 divided by 0.15. So the number that is being divided into, we call that the dividend. So that number right there is called the dividend. So there's negative 4.6875, that is our dividend, and is being divided by 0.15, that is called our divisor. So the dividend divided by the divisor gives us an answer to this division problem, which is called the quotient. So you should be familiar with the word quotient, as you are with words like sum, meaning the result of adding, product being the result of multiplying, difference being the result of subtraction. In this case, quotient is the result of dividing. It's the result of dividing the dividend of negative 4.6875 by the divisor, 0.15. So what we're going to do is to set this up in our long division house. I'm going to do that off to the side here. And don't forget, it's the first number, the dividend, that goes into our house. So 4.6875. Now notice I'm leaving the negative sign out. We'll account for that in a moment. The divisor goes on the outside, 0.15. Now notice I left the zero off because the zero is insignificant in this case. So we're not going to acknowledge the zero. So 4.6875 divided by 0.15 is the long division problem that we're setting up. Now before I go any further, this is where I'm going to account for my sign and my answer. And I can see I have a single negative sign, which means I have an odd amount of negative signs. So I'm going to have a negative answer. And what I do like about the long division house is that I can just put that negative sign right up on the roof so that by the time I get to my final answer as my quotient, the sign is in front of my answer already. So from here, we are ready to start working through our division. But before we do that, we need to do one last thing. The decimal point in the divisor needs to be moved. We need to, if you recall from our class discussion, we need to turn that outside number, that divisor, into a whole number. And that requires us to essentially multiply by powers of 10. Now, every time we multiply by 10, we're moving the decimal point one space to the right. So we're moving 2 spaces. I'm multiplying times 10 times 10 again, times 10 to the second power. That's going to allow my decimal point to move to the right, and that divisor is now going to become the value of 15 instead of 0.15. So we just want to be aware that before we actually get going with our division, that the outside number of the divisor is turned into a whole number. So there. But by doing so, we're also going to have to move the inside number, that number of spaces. So since I moved the divisor decimal point 2 spaces to the right, I need to do the same with the dividend decimal point 2 spaces to the right. That's what keeps this problem in balance. And as a result, I'll be able to move my decimal point up to the top. So now we're ready to start with our actual dividing. So we start to ask ourselves, how many times does the new divisor we've created of 15 go into 4? And it does not go in. So I like to put an X there just so I don't lose track of where my digits are in my final quotient answer. I then ask myself, how many times does 15 go into 46? And I might need to do a little bit of guessing here. If I try 15 times 2, I know that's 30. And if I try to squeeze in one more group of 15, 15 times 3, that gives me 45. And if you weren't certain of that, what you would do is a little bit of multiplying off to the side here. You would see 3 times 5 is 15, carry the 1, 3 times 1 is 3, plus the 1 is 45. From here, we subtract. So 46 minus that 45 we got from multiplying 15 times 3 is 1. We now move down the next digit in our dividend. So we bring the 8 down. And we repeat the process. So 15, how many times does it go into 18? It goes in 1 time, we can clearly see. So again, we take that next digit in our quotient, we multiply it by the divisor, by 15, we get 15, and we subtract one more time, and we get a 3 as a remainder. Once again, we carry the next digit down, and we repeat the process. Now notice we are ready to jump to the other side of the decimal point, since we just brought the 7 down. So we already talked about 15 times 2 was 30, so that seems to be where we're going to be able to fit in for how many, whoops, 2 times. So 15 times 2 is 30. We will subtract, and 30 minus 30 is 7. We have one more digit to drop down, and that's 5. So here again, you may have to do a little bit of guesswork. We already know that 15 times 3 is 45. Well, if we add another 15, you can feel free to do some repeated addition. That's now a total of 4 15s, which gets us to 60. And if we add 15 again, lucky for us, that gets us a perfect hit. That's a total of 5 times that 15 goes in. When I do 15 times 5, that's 75. And 0 is our remainder. So the final answer to negative 4.6875 divided by 0.15 is negative 31.25. So there are 2 problems at the bottom. I'll ask you to repeat that process on your own. So make sure your first number goes inside the division house, your divisor, and your dividend, and your second number goes outside the house as your divisor. So dividend in the house, divisor outside the house, and then adjust for your decimal points and account for your signs before you actually start doing the division. So again, you'll put your dividend inside the house, your divisor outside the house, you'll adjust for your decimal points, both inside and out, and you'll account for the signs as you need to. So I want you to do those problems independently, and we'll check those in class tomorrow.